What does it actually mean to be human? Is it the way we walk? The size of our brain? The ability to communicate? Or was there a moment millions of years ago when one of our distant ancestors picked up a stone and realised that it could be used for something more? Around 2 million years ago, Africa was the home to several very different species of our evolutionary family, living alongside one another in a dangerous and rapidly changing world. Among them was a small, primitive creature that has left scientists arguing ever since its discovery. Was it simply another Australopithecine, or had something fundamentally new appeared? This is the story of mysterious fossils, ancient stone tools, growing brains, and the tantalizing possibility of communication, cooperation, and even somewhere that might have resembled a home. Join me as we meet the controversial creature known as Homo habilis, the handyman.
This is the History of the World podcast. Written and presented by Chris Hasler.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos, sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
Instagram teen accounts come with automatic protections that limit who can contact teens, the content they can see, and the time they spend on the app. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
Volume 1, The Prehistoric World. Episode 3, Homo habilis. Last time, we explored the Australopithecines. We looked at the archaeological discoveries that led to our understanding of these pre-human animals and began to develop an idea about their physical stature. We learned that although being bipedal, that they would have spent a lot of their time in trees, but would have been subject to environmental pressures forcing them to come out of the trees and learn how to adapt to life on the ground. We investigated how difficult it is for scientists to confidently classify whether they are our direct ancestors due to the lack of evidence within the fossil record, making it unclear whether sexual dimorphism was apparent, but we did establish that it was more ape-like than human-like in its appearance. We've looked at the evolutionary split, one line becoming the powerful, robust paranthropines, while another eventually gave rise to the very first humans. And it is that pioneering species, Homo habilis, that we're diving into today. The mystery of tools. This week's subject is Homo habilis. Homo habilis is generally regarded as the earliest member of the genus Homo, although this remains a matter for debate. One thing we associate with all human species is that they are all skilled stone tool producers, so that would suggest that Homo habilis manufactured the first stone tools. Last time we were questioning whether Australopithecines had the intelligence, dexterity, and requirement to manufacture stone tools themselves. The reason why we asked this question is because we believed that subsequent species, chronologically speaking, did use tools. So let's discover how we know this. Olduvai Gorge. Let us explore why Olduvai Gorge is so significant to the story of Homo habilis. Olduvai Gorge is a gorge in the landscape located in Tanzania. We visited Tanzania in the last podcast episode when we discussed the Laetoli footprints, which were discovered by a team led by Mary Leakey in the 1970s. The Laetoli footprints were discovered purely because Leakey, with her late husband Lewis, had worked at the nearby Olduvai Gorge for many years. Let's see why they were working there. If we travel back to the year 1913, Tanzania was part of a German East African colony which they called Deutsch Ostafrika, literally German East Africa. Now let me introduce a gentleman called Hans Reck. Hans Reck was born in 1886 in the town of Würzburg in the relatively new German Empire. Reck was successful academically, studying natural history at university level. Reck became very active in a hands-on capacity in his field, and his studies eventually led him to Deutsch Ostafrika in the early 1910s to study some of the many dinosaur fossils which had been discovered there. In late 1913, an excavation at Olduvai Gorge was brought to Reck's attention. It was human skeletal remains. Reck determined that this had to be the remains of a prehistoric human and returned to Berlin to publish an article on the discovery. Radiometric dating was not available back then, so Reck's claim was controversial. Modern dating later showed that the skeleton was not prehistoric, but a much more recent burial that had become embodied in older sediments. Now it was 1914 in Germany. The Great War broke out, and although Reck returned to Deutsch Ostafrika to continue his work, it was almost impossible in the shadow of the East African campaign. British and Belgian troops advanced from the Belgian Congo in the west. After the war, Deutsch Ostafrika was divided, with the main portion, including Olduvai Gorge, becoming the British-administered territory of Tanganyika. In 1927, a young Louis Leakey tracked down Hans Reck, who had since been allowed to return to Olduvai Gorge. The two of them continued investigating the site. Despite the excavation of many tools, Reck suffered from ill health later in life, and the mystery of the skeleton faded as more significant discoveries emerged, not least from Louis Leakey himself. In 1959, Louis's wife Mary, whom we met in earlier episodes, went exploring while Louis was feeling under the weather back at camp. She stumbled across a prehistoric skull. This skull was noted for its sagittal crest, a ridge running from the forehead to the back of the head. The crest supported powerful jaw muscles, giving the animal a gorilla-like bite. This specimen, nicknamed Nutcracker Man, is now classified as Paranthropus boisei and dated to about 1.8 million years ago, slightly older than the original 1.75 million estimate. The following year, 1960, Louis and Mary's eldest son, Jonathan, who himself was a young adult, discovered some fragmented bones of a skeleton once again dated to approximately 1.75 million years ago, but they were quite unlike the bones of the Nutcracker Man. For the sake of discussion, we will refer to this second animal as Johnny's Child, an informal name, rather than its proper name, Specimen OH7. All of these discoveries were made at the famed Olduvai Gorge, which for the record is actually supposed to be called Olduvai Gorge. Olduvai was the German mishearing of the local Maasai word, Olduvai, the name of a type of wild sisal plant abundant in the gorge. Nutcracker Man and Johnny's Child. Let us compare the two stories of Nutcracker Man and Johnny's Child and see if they tell us anything about the evolution of Australopithecines into more modern animals. So the Nutcracker Man was discovered first. It was clearly bipedal, but clearly did not have a lot in common with modern humans and therefore could not be considered as human. Potentially linked ancestrally to human evolution, but clearly not a human itself. Mary and Louis Leakey originally named this animal Zinjanthropus boisei. Zinjanthropus, after the archaic name of the Kenya and Tanzania coastline of East Africa called Zinjum. Boisei is attributed in acknowledgement of the American businessman Charles Watson Boyce, who sponsored the Leakey's expedition to Olduvai Gorge. Johnny's Child, on the other hand, had a brain capacity roughly 20% larger than Nutcracker Man's. It lacked the exaggerated jaws and massive molars of Zinj, featuring teeth and jaws much more similar to modern humans. Furthermore, its hand bones suggested the dexterity required to manufacture stone tools. These traits, especially the dexterous hands, led Louis and Mary Leakey to name the species Homo habilis, or handyman. It was all of these things, and not least of all the factor relating to the dexterous hands, that encouraged the Leakeys to name Johnny's Child as Homo habilis. Habilis refers to the hands being skillful or capable, and more significantly, Homo referring to it being of the same genus as Homo sapiens, modern humans. As expected, this caused huge controversy. Anything called Homo would need to be closely related to modern humans, as Homo sapiens is the base type species for anything called Homo, and Homo habilis was as distant from Homo sapiens as any other animal categorized as Homo previously. Still to this very day, Homo habilis is challenged as a member within the genus Homo, with some believing it to still be an Australopithecine. Certainly, Nutcracker Man, or Zinj, as he came to be more affectionately known after being categorized as Zinjanthropus boisei, has taken a different scientific route as one would expect. He was moved into a different genus called Paranthropus, which had been created by the Scottish paleontologist Robert Broom in the 1930s for his own personally named Paranthropus robustus. All Paranthropus species are now considered to be Australopithecine, and as such are referred to as the robust Australopithecines to distinguish their differing morphology. Those animals belonging to the Australopithecus genus being referred to as the gracile Australopithecines for distinction. One undeniable and inescapable fact is that Paranthropus boisei and Homo habilis lived during a similar time period and in close proximity to each other. It would be very unlikely, with the considerable differences between each other, for one to have descended from the other. Therefore, the retrospectively naive method of thinking that modern humans evolved from a common ape ancestor in a linear fashion was now completely out of the question. Human evolution is far more complex. No member of Paranthropus, a cousin of the Australopithecus and Homo, has been discovered that dates more recent than 1.2 million years ago, and nothing that could present a case for it evolving into something else either. Paranthropus represents an evolutionary branch that ultimately became extinct. The story of the Nutcracker Man is over. Australopithecus, or Homo habilis. Now, we will discuss exactly how human Homo habilis really is. So, I have a number of reference books for which I referred to for material for these podcast episodes. I have a beautiful book called History of the World, originally edited by the celebrated historian John Whitney Hall. I could describe it as the most impressive history book in my library. This book makes a conscious decision to call Homo habilis Australopithecus habilis, despite Lewis Leakey's categorization of the species that he discovered as within the genus Homo. Accepting that the robust Australopithecines died out as Paranthropus, the gracile Australopithecines quite probably evolved into Homo habilis, but this particular book insists upon Homo habilis being included with the gracile Australopithecines. So let's have a look at the physical characteristics of Homo habilis and see if we can determine why this is so contentious. Hall's book states that Homo habilis had a larger brain than Australopithecus africanus. It also states that Homo habilis had smaller molar teeth than Australopithecus africanus, but other than these two aspects, the two animals are actually fairly similar. For example, it is suggested that both animals, even though bipedal, would not have walked completely upright like modern humans, or even other more modern animals within the genus Homo. It also claims that although Homo habilis has a more precise hand grip, that its hands were still morphologically suited to tree climbing than overarm spear throwing. The fact that Homo habilis only stood at just over 4 feet high would suggest that its diet was also very similar to the diet thought to have been associated with Australopithecus, that being more plant-based than meat-eating. However, a counter-argument to suggest that Homo habilis was more significantly advanced than Australopithecus is the fact that a comparative abundance of stone tools accompany Homo habilis fossils. This has been linked to encephalization, which is the process of Homo's brain size increasing quite rapidly during its evolutionary process. This requires a more detailed explanation. Roughly speaking, during that period from 3 million years ago when Australopithecines were abundant to 2 million years ago when Homo habilis had fully evolved, the brain capacity increased from around 1/3 of a modern human to 1/2. This can be considered as significant encephalization. Some scientists have suggested something called the expensive tissue hypothesis. To explain the expensive tissue hypothesis without going into a deep biological commentary, in order for the brain size to increase, encephalization, there has to be a compromise of one of the other expensive organs of the body. In this case, it is the gastrointestinal tract, which fundamentally is the stomach and intestines. A means of compromising the gastrointestinal tract is to improve the diet, and this is where the stone tools come in. It is thought that the stone tools would have been used to butcher meat and make it a more significant part of the diet, which would have been required to improve the efficiency of the gastrointestinal tract, and therefore allow the brain to have access to a greater share of the body's energy budget, and therefore increase its size. Basically, you have to take from one to give to the other. This is one of the fundamental arguments that suggests that Homo habilis is more like a modern human than it is like an Australopithecine, and therefore deserves to belong to the Homo genus. Now, these are all just fascinating arguments both for and against the habilis inclusion into the genus of Homo. It is still an ongoing argument, and the beauty of it is that we can all take part and give our own opinion. Who else was around 2 million years ago? Let's travel back down to the south of the continent of Africa, again to the limestone caves of South Africa. During the last podcast episode, we were at Tung, where Tung Child, later to be classified as Australopithecus africanus, was discovered. This time, we are 4 hours east from there, just 40 kilometres northwest of Johannesburg, in the Sterkfontein Caves. A partial skull found in the caves back in 1977 has controversially been proposed as a distinct species of Homo called Homo gautengensis, named after the Gauteng province of South Africa, where the Sterkfontein Caves are located. A controversial species proposed by Darren Curnow, an Australian archaeologist and paleoanthropologist known for his work on human evolution, especially in Australasia and Southeast Asia. Homo gautengensis dates to around 1.9 million years ago and is suggested to have eaten a very plant-rich diet compared to Homo habilis. However, it is believed to have still spent a considerable amount of time in the trees, not least of all to sleep safely from predators. However, the American-born paleoanthropologist Lee Rogers Berger declared yet another hominin species dating to a similar period following its discovery in the Malapa fossil site, not more than 10 miles from Sterkfontein in 2008. He named the fossilized bones as belonging to an animal called Australopithecus sediba. Berger proposed that Australopithecus sediba possessed a mosaic of Australopithecine and Homo-like traits and may represent a close relative of the ancestry of Homo. Throw in the two living species of Paranthropus that were believed to be alive during the same period, and this illustrates scientists' belief that many different species of hominins were alive simultaneously, and what's more is that in some areas they were actually living alongside each other. All of these animals were bipedal, feeding off the vegetation and in some cases, and to differing degrees, were eating meat and also finding refuge by climbing and sleeping in trees. Some were certainly manufacturing stone tools with which they could carve meat from dead animals, and due to the encephalization which was making their brains ever more powerful, they may have had basic social skills. Social skills. How good was Homo habilis at social communication? Applying the theory of social skills to Homo habilis is a very difficult task. However, it is a subject which is very important in the field of anthropological study. When did humans develop advanced social skills? Could individuals of Homo habilis communicate with each other effectively? Did they have any speech or linguistic skills? To approach that question, I will introduce a gentleman by the name of Philip V. Tobias. Tobias was born in Durban, South Africa in 1925. He was very successful academically, studying in a number of fields at Wits University, the very same university where Raymond Dart, from our last podcast episode, was previously appointed. He graduated with a Bachelor of Medicine and a Bachelor of Surgery in 1950, and went on to be awarded a Doctor of Science for his work within the field of paleoanthropology. Tobias worked with the Leakeys and was closely associated with their discovery of Homo habilis. It was Tobias's belief that not only was Homo habilis a skilled toolmaker, but that Homo habilis also had some linguistic capability. This goes against some experts' views that linguistic capability is something of a modern development that should only be attributed to modern humans. Speech and linguistic skills probably depend on two main factors. Firstly, the animal in question needs to have the intelligence to do so. Secondly, the animal in question needs to have the physical capability to do so. In other words, I might have the intelligence to play the piano, but if I have no hands, then I will not have the physical capability. Therefore, in order for Homo habilis to verbally communicate, it needs to have an advanced vocal physicality. In my very humble and uneducated point of view, It is a known fact that chimpanzees have a complex system of vocalizations with which they can communicate with each other. Also, it is worth noting that the planet was undergoing climate change as the planet entered the Quaternary glaciation, cooling down the temperature of the planet and as a consequence changing the environment. This in turn has added pressure to the adaptability of species, and the ones that are able to adapt have survived. If Homo habilis possessed vocal abilities beyond those of modern apes, it may have gained important survival advantages. Encephalization. Let us investigate the process of hominin brain size expansion, otherwise called encephalization. Now, it may seem like we have made a gentle transition from the Australopithecines of 3 million years ago to the first Homo genus animal of 2 million years ago. We have mentioned encephalization a lot during this podcast episode as one of the most important changes during Australopithecus evolving into Homo. But now we are crossing that threshold. This whole encephalization thing is going to go out of control. During the last 2 million years, Homo's brain capacity has increased at an unprecedented rate. This is the beginning of our journey to becoming the complex and conscious human being that we are today. So we can tie everything together that has been discussed already into this fabric. Starting with the Australopithecines, we can determine that the brain capacity was around 28 cubic inches. Forgive the imperial measurements, but I want to demonstrate the growth in a simple method numerically, as this equates to around 460 cubic centimetres. 28 units of something is probably easier to visualise than 460 units. So, from 28 cubic inches 3 million years ago, we move forward a million years to 2 million years ago and move on to the robust Australopithecines, or the Paranthropines, whose brain size is around 32 cubic inches. This is a notable increase, but not as much as their contemporaries, Homo habilis, whose brain size is around 40 cubic inches. To go from 28 cubic inches to 40 cubic inches in 1 million years is substantial, but this is just the beginning. When you consider that the modern human brain size is around 90 cubic inches, it shows that we still have a long journey ahead of us with a lot of development. So far, we have tackled the expensive tissue theory, which has supported the idea of improved diet, meaning less energy required to break down foods, and in turn more energy devoted to brain development. With brain size increasing, this also has an impact on the amount of time it takes for the brain to grow into a fully mature organ. Therefore, in simple terms, it means that childhood accounts for a longer percentage of the lifetime of the more recent animal. It will take a longer period of time for the brain to grow to its full size. This in turn increases the requirement for pair bonding. So the parental responsibility of the animal is a more fundamental requirement. While the baby animal requires more time to fully mature, the parent has to devote more time to the development of the child's maturity. This will require a much higher quality of social skill and interaction between the parents and the extended family group. In summary, this ties everything together. Survival of the fittest and subsequent evolution of a modernising human in a changing world climate requires a more intelligent animal. The successful animal was able to improve its diet by developing tools that could enable it to eat a much more protein-rich meat-based diet to allow for encephalization to occur. And as such, there needed to be a close social bond between these animals for them to be able to allow their children to develop into the more advanced animal, safe from predation and other dangers, and able to learn and comprehend the advanced skills needed to survive on this rapidly modernising planet. Home. Something that interested me when studying this species of animal was the concept of Homo habilis living in a home, a safe haven where an animal can return to at the end of the day. If we go back to Olduvai Gorge and the work of Mary Leakey, she was particularly interested in some of the findings at the DK site. There she discovered a rock ring. Basically, this was a group of rocks specifically placed in a ring shape on the ground. Trying to understand its purpose, she would compare it to the behaviour of modern nomadic people who create rock rings as the foundation of a small thatched dwelling in which one can obtain shelter. Some other factors that may contribute to the feasibility of such a theory would be that a lot of stone tools were found in caches, gathered together as if they were deliberately stored. Another interesting factor is that as humans evolved, the human baby would be less likely to naturally cling to its mother, as it would surely be losing that tree-dwelling grip for a more purposeful grip. Therefore, it would seem reasonable that the mother would have to put the baby down somewhere safe rather than physically carry it everywhere. As you can well imagine, scientists also challenge this theory. Some argue that Homo habilis would not have been able to maintain a base for long as the threat of predation was very real, and it would only be a matter of time before a predator would become interested in such a dwelling and quickly destroy it. If climbing trees was still a possibility, then surely it would have been much more practical to go up a tree than create an elaborate dwelling. It does seem quite likely that Homo habilis would have been able to and would have put to use such shelters. Even if they were not being used as homes, they could have been used as base camps for storage of food and tools, and even for identifying meeting points if they existed in cooperative groups. If Homo habilis had managed to scavenge a carcass from another animal, then he would have wanted to put it somewhere safe. Either way, this is something for which more evidence could continually come to light. So it might be the case that in the coming years, we may get more answers to our questions. Looking forwards. This development of human physicality, mentality, and ability will continue. Humans are becoming more physically upright. Their brains are growing and their skills are developing. The world is changing and humans are changing with it. Next time, we are going to look at the next major evolution of the Homo species, Homo erectus.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos, sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
Instagram teen accounts come with automatic protections that limit who can contact teens, the content they can see, and the time they spend on the app. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
Now, don't run off. Don't run off. I know the episode's over, but I've got a couple of important things to tell you. Firstly, thank you for listening to this episode of the History of the World podcast on Homo habilis. And this is a re-recording of the original episode. The re-recording made in 2026. The original recording was made in 2018. But you can listen to the original. You just go to Spotify and or go to the episode or the podcast description, I should say. So the general podcast description. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify for a small amount, something like $2.99 a month, and you can get access to all the hidden material. So consider that. If you like the podcast and you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is to sign up to make a monthly contribution. To do that, you go to the historyoftheworldpodcast.com, our website. You can have a little click around, have an explore, have a look at what's there. But also click on the Patreon link and sign up to make a monthly contribution. It can be for a small amount, $1 a month. It can be a large amount. Some people do $50 a month. God bless them. And you can sign up and you'll become a lifelong member of what we call the History of the World podcast Illuminati. And if you contribute enough, you can actually commission your own episodes of this podcast, which some people have actually done. There's all sorts of interesting bespoke episodes out there, like the missing 9th Legion of the Roman army, and also New Netherland, the nucleus of what would become New York City. Plenty of interesting material has been recommended by our listeners and those who have made fundamental contributions to the future of this podcast. Please don't forget to explore our sister podcast, History of the World podcast Timelines. We're rattling through the American presidents at a rate of knots. And these episodes are between 15 and 20 minutes long. They're very short and very sweet, and we get to the fundamental truth about all of the US presidents. So give that a try. I think we're up to episode 12 now, so plenty more material to listen to. Finally, please drop me a line and let me know what you think about the podcast. I'm interested in all of your thoughts, so put pen to paper, to coin an old phrase, and email me at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. I always read your emails out. I'm always excited to see them, to read them, to reply to them, and to discuss them during these podcast episodes. So please do write in. That's enough from me this week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And next time, Homo erectus. Until then, be good.
The right window treatments change everything. Your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 five-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals, free samples, zero pressure. Save up to 40% when you buy 2 or more. Rules and restrictions apply.
NFL football season is here, which means when you switch to Verizon, it feels like touchdown, because you get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us when you buy an eligible 5G phone on select unlimited plans, which means you can watch every out-of-market game every Sunday afternoon, and it's all on us. Now that's the Verizon way to kick off the NFL football season right. Switch and get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us, only with Verizon.
See you.
Avatar: Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney+. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney+.
It will be an adventure for the whole family.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar: Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Are you enjoying the History of the World podcast?
If so, visit historyoftheworldpodcast.com, click on the Patreon link, and sign up to make a monthly contribution. Follow the History of the World podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads, Tumblr, and Mastodon. And don't forget to look out for our sister podcast, History of the World Podcast Timelines. Thanks for listening.